Okay. So the theme is color and sound into belief systems, which probably means we should put graffiti over every holy building in the world and shout. No? Well, we'll try another angle then. Okay, so let's have a meditation to anchor us to the theme. What is belief if it is too clearly defined, too tangible, too limiting in its outward form? What is belief if it must fulfill only the human needs or the desires that will take away many of our challenging experiences? What shall we believe? That the world itself should be limited and life should be some accident, a collision of molecules? Or should we allow ourselves to expand into a universe which itself is expanding into the way in which light, as it bends through the universe of its own expression, has no end, perhaps no beginning, yet it has continuity. And even as we look into the emptiness of space, it is only empty because of our lack of vision and because our instruments that we create scientifically cannot yet measure enough. There is no empty space, and there is nothing which is static. There is the cause of it all, which is constant and present, and then there is movement and change. How shall we believe in this and find one common path when every individual is unique? How shall we insist on a way that is more correct than the others when there is no separation from the source nor in the completion? And between one and the other there is every single kind of variation. Yet as far as we might go one aspect from another, until they are all together and united, there can be no completion for anyone. Yet our faiths would seem to suggest a certain way is more prevalent, more perfect, perhaps more chosen. And in many ways, the word of the Creator seems to be clearer to some than it is to others. Yet it is in the constancy of its original message and the continuous variation within its outward expression that allows us the freedom of our own awakening. For we are the incarnation of belief. We are the very expression of the spiritual impulse of life. We are the words in form and in path and in way of it all, in all of its mystery. Shall we then just love one another as it has been encouraged? And with this allow us to become conscious of everything? Perhaps this is the key, that it is in complete simplicity and without the need for proving or disproving anything. But love itself leads us into the wisdom that holds it all together. And wisdom brings us into the purpose of a creator. But love is the path, love is the way, love is the key. And all else then can follow and flow. But who will believe this as if it was the way? So we hold these thoughts just a moment to anchor to our theme. I wonder what conclusion we should come to before we begin. Because wherever we find ourselves, it cannot be static. And in whatever aspect we are most attracted, there will always be those who are equally as attracted in some other way, in some other form. If we feel that the Christ came to make everybody into a Christian, then what of those who achieve the level of bodhisattva, or who enter into samadhi and enlightenment and nirvana? Who are those who achieve the oneness within the flow and union of all? And what of those who find themselves with the Great Spirit through the very forces of nature? Shall one be greater or lesser than another? And if we look into the history of our own many lives, how many paths have we already walked, and how many ways have we worked with the very same theme again and again? And is there any other purpose to life than its spiritual intention, even if we conceal such a statement inside war, or the seeking of power, or just the search for knowledge for its own sake, or for personal glory in one way or another? Or if we become immersed in the extremes of suffering, and we call this the pathway of learning, as if there is some loving God who teaches us through punishment in some sense. If we find a world in extremes, is this a creative expression of some system of belief? And if we were all united and said the same words and sat up and sat down at the same moment and sang the same songs, would this also share our wealth? Would this also free us into a level of understanding where our own capacity, in a voluntary way, would long to find the answers to its own questions, and would search together and would support one another? And how would this be? Would we suddenly find that if the very creative force that unites us all would prefer us to be vegetarians, how would that suit so much business in the world? If we found that the very instruction of our belief system said, "Thou shalt not kill," then why should we create an army and spend enormous resources on weapons of mass destruction? What is destruction when everything anyway only changes its form? And the limitation of its outward expression is in that very moment of destruction freed from that moment into its own, we could say, its own eternal possibilities. Is life necessary at all if we waste it so carelessly? And if we take life so easily, even to feed ourselves, we take the lives of animals who obviously suffer, is this something that we should celebrate? Celebrate the birth of a cosmic being every year? How many animals are slaughtered? How many people die? How much blood sacrifice is there in the name of some sort of belief? And does the great source of this belief believe in our way? Do they believe in us if we choose this? I mean, it's fun to think of this. It's not meant to be too critical. It is a little cynical, but it is not meant to deny or to diminish the pure intention that is in the heart of many, or to not appreciate the level of those who are at a certain stage, and at that stage feel completely at peace with wherever they are and with wherever they are going. If we are to work with the systems of belief, and light is its source, then color must be its pathway, and every particular system of belief must pass through every single level of the frequency of light, as it finds its expression both in form, which means its expression in sound, for form is held together by the frequency of sound, and the way in which actually our psychological and psychic nature is balanced very finely upon these wavelengths of harmony, of simplicity, of that which seeks to bring us into an unending expression of the longing that is within our heart and soul. It's always interesting to see how many notes are there in a scale of music, but how unlimited, how limitless is the expression of music in its creative possibility. How many letters in an alphabet of a particular language? And how many ways can stories be spoken and songs be sung? And are they ever quite repeated exactly the same? And what shall we do with numbers? And we get to a simple limit between 1 and 10, and we find that we can telephone every number in the world and calculate almost anything. And then if we need to go further than numbers, we use letters perhaps from an ancient alphabet, like the Greek alphabet. And here we go into other levels and other states of calculation, of which the very source of life is the aim, to understand how it all began and to appreciate where it will lead. And then we deny. We deny all the great sages, saints and seers who talk of life not after death, but life parallel to this life, life that is continuous, consciousness that is not limited, but is held within its own frequency in one way, but belongs to the same union of many different levels. We do live at this level within the limitation of 7 colors, and even in this we only see in part, and even out of this we only awaken in some diminished sense. For what creates the sense of reality is anchored through the inaccuracy of a brain that is not yet fully awakened, and a balance between our human and divine nature, between our masculine and feminine nature, that cannot yet find the equivalent enough within itself to find its expression sufficiently within the way we exchange with each other in our lives. What shall we do if we are from another planet and we observe this world? Shall we look at it as it is, as if we take one photograph and judge everyone from this one moment and say, this is mankind? Shall we condemn them? I watched the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, and I thought it was a very interesting choice of this space person who looked at the Earth, asked a few people some silly questions, and decided that the world should end. Now, the fact that it was a decision of some cosmic being of some great power who seemed to be singularly underinformed and poorly aware or intelligent, maybe this is our way of defining our Creator in a way, singularly uninformed and and rather unintelligent. Of course, there are many wise words written that are inspired, and there are many laws and customs created that I think are mainly for our health and well-being and how to live together. But how much is there of the actual path of enlightenment that is there available for us, that we are able to make use of? And if we look at our many lives, and we see that we have, on many occasions, achieved great and beautiful insight and understanding, and we've achieved many things at a great selfless level. Why on earth are we so ignorant now? Why do we have a personality which is singularly lacking in areas which, if we were going to design it, at least with a little bit of understanding, we wouldn't have created quite the same limitations? Or would we? From what level does wisdom really work? And shall we try to observe the world and believe in the Creator from an aspect of ourselves which, by definition, is going to be the lesser rather than the greater, and also by design is going to bring us into areas where we are least experienced very often, and give us tools where, if we are going to do some good in the world, we're going to have to use these tools in a different way from as they appear. We have to make our own tools. We have many gifts. Why aren't they added to us right now? And yet, we have to make the best use of the least in us. So what shall we believe in? If we believe in ourselves, this is what we're encouraged, our systems of self-awareness and self-management and awakening. Believe in yourself. To thine own self be true. Which self? Which level of self? Which aspect? Which combination of aspects? Certainly we have a genetic background, and genetically we do have common factors that unite us all, no further distant than 40th cousin, probably much closer. I'm too nervous to look for the origin of my family. There's a possibility of doing this now. And we can find out some very interesting facts. I was watching on a program, and I thought, well, what about me? Do I really want to know that I'm related to Genghis Khan, or because most people are in Europe? Or some other dictator that, if I look at the historical information, is bloodthirsty, you know, not very interesting, not very enlightened. And then if I did find that I was related to Leonardo da Vinci, which is questionable because many people say he was gay, he was not so interested in having his own children. But if by some accident you could say I was, then I would feel very worried, because to come from such a great source and to be such lacking in this capacity for greatness, I would despair of life, you know. But then if our genetics only mirrors or anchors the qualities that come through the creation of a character, the creation of a state of conscious participation at a voluntary level within the creative process of life, the ability to take responsibility for being interested, for being involved, for making exchanges, and for, in some way, dealing with the consequence of our actions, however ignorant, but very truthfully and with nothing held back. If we could live this way, then what would be the advantage? And if this is the way, to be very truthful, to be very conscious of what we have done or what we have not done, to be non-judgmental, to be able to cooperate and to be able to enter in at whatever level we find ourselves, but to enter into the hierarchy of whatever system or structure, but to be fully true to ourselves so that no position is greater or lesser than another, only technically in order for life to function. But in fact, any point is an entry point into the whole, and whatever we can do at whatever point will inspire and infuse the whole. Is this the way? And how shall we calculate it through color and sound? How shall we celebrate it? How long does it take us to even ask the right questions about life? And would we ask the right questions if all things worked well and easy and flowed, and our qualities were somehow awakened spontaneously? Would we know anything about anything if everything about everything just manifested spontaneously? So in a certain sense, we have to become creators in the making. We have to become all the colors of the spectrum as aspects of a divine intention, and then compose our own symphony. Take a chance in it. Become every instrument of the orchestra. How many instruments would you like in your orchestra? Maybe you'd like to be just a virtuosi. Just one instrument would do. Perhaps a duet. Perhaps a quintet. Or what about a great and beautiful orchestra of many instruments of every kind? Do we look at our lives, if we look now at the spectrum, if we think of our lives as a spectrum of color and sound, if we look at the spectrum of those, not just with whom we are related by blood, but whom we are related by interest and activity, whether we like them or not doesn't matter. You cannot always enjoy the sound of a trumpet when you wish for a quiet moment, but a trumpeter, nonetheless, is a part of life. So, if we look around and we say that I live within an orchestra, and within this orchestra, each one in playing their instrument, in creating their own symphony, includes me as much as I include them, and that we won't know the consequence of it all until it is all played out fully and to the extent that it can be. And even then, how many questions will be unanswered, because here we are, the expression of all the unanswered questions from other symphonies and other times. Do we have an option? I have many friends who have decided to jump off the planet before the Lord took them. They chose singularly uninteresting ways. At least if they jumped off a very high building trying to fly with some wings, they might have made it. And then they could have had an excuse if they didn't. It would have looked good. Why didn't they want to stay longer? Why did they want to jump off a cliff without a parachute? Is our belief system our parachute, and that we are all in free flying flow? That there is really no earth, there is only space, and the space of consciousness is anchored to an earth which is linked to a system of belief. Is this our color red, that anchors us to the earth? For the earth is a magical domain. It is full of magic. There is nothing else but magic on the earth. Although perhaps we shouldn't use the word, because it sounds a little bit like the manipulation of energies. But what are we doing? Turning oil into flames, and flames into electricity, and electricity boils the water, and I can have a cup of tea. That's quite magical. So the whole of the earth is the manipulation of energies. But if we go behind the laws that we have come to use, if you like, second hand, where is the first hand? And we can see that all the systems of belief arise from the very base chakra, from the energy of the earth, from the frequency that gives life to life and insists on life and nothing else but this insistence. The urge to live and the urge to grow is irresistible. And the meaning of it all unites us quite instinctively at first, quite outside of our rational or reasoning mind, even beyond our singular emotions, into a group feeling and into a group knowing, perhaps, although the intelligence behind this knowing we may not know. Therefore, if we could see with our instinctive eye, with our solar plexus, if we could see with our yellow center what is anchored through our red center, we would see a fairy, a gnome, beside every flower, every fruit that is ripening. We would see, as the wind blows, there are zephyrs that have a form and then they're formless, but form again and then are formless. We would see as the snow falls, that there are beings who in soul, perhaps, could we say even that word, every single snowflake, thousands upon countless thousands of snowflakes that are dissolved. The sun comes up and they're all dissolved. The outer form is there, it takes its form for a moment, but the impulse within the form, there is our original belief. It gives us the food we eat, it encourages us in the way we live, it forces us, compels us in the forms that we take to survive. Perhaps we have to be pushed to the outer limits, We are on a planet that is at the outer limits, almost, of our solar system, of not of our solar system, but of our galaxy. Our solar system is right on the edge of the galaxy. That does mean something. It means it's very primitive, or slow-moving, or it means that the spectrum of light into which life incarnates has to remember itself from nothing almost, until it can remember itself into everything. So we could say that the basic impulse of belief is the reality of how life expresses itself through every season and through the change of seasons and through every fruit and through the ripening of these fruits and through the way in which life and nature in life produces an endless variety. It's endless, but also produces extraordinary abundance. It never produces just enough for something. It produces more than it could ever use and wastes it all, apparently, but recycles it all so that nothing is wasted. And then as we come into the orange center, there's an impulse which draws us a little bit deeper and further into that which looks for a balance. Out of the pure force of life comes an impulse to balance, comes a way to share, in fact. Now the earth color, the base chakra, the red, it works through the muscles of the body. This is the anchor through literally the will, we could say. The force that gives action into life. We can think and feel and meditate, but if we want to manifest at a certain moment, we must do something. And the red is the belief in doing. But when we come into the orange, that area of belief comes into the pathway of sharing. There must be an exchange. There must be a way of an exchange. But what is this? For all of life, in its impulse to force, comes into the exchange. The orange color links to the digestive system, digestion and assimilation. And here, there is exchange between one life and another, always. All life recycles and circulates through all other life. There's no possibility of avoiding it. Sooner or later, we enter into the digestive processes of other life forms. They enter into our life form. Other food we eat enters into those forms. And so it continues again and again. The air that we breathe is breathed by everyone, sooner or later. The water that we drink is recycled again and again through every life form and through all of us. The warmth that we feel awakens us, and the warmth that we circulate and radiate, we share in many different ways. So that the sense of exchange is inevitable, but the sense of exchange is also the way in which we are inspired. Orange is the impulse through belief that opens the pathway to the recognition of beauty, of wonder, of awe, of a kind of inspiration. To be awakened by the joy of creation, we become imitators of creation, in a way. For can we create in our systems of belief an expression that is not an art form, really? The great cathedrals are encyclopedias in stone in one way, but they are the anchoring of extraordinary art and creativity in another. And how much of our paintings and how much of our art, of our literature and poetry comes from this very source in every single culture. The great buildings are always to the glory of the Creator, under whatever name. And these are great buildings. These are not just places to live. There are vaulted ceilings and great pyramids and architecture that creates designs and expressions which, where does the impulse come? As if we are a digestive system of higher sources, and as we can assimilate something from another level, food we could say from the cosmos, from the higher consciousness, what do we turn it into, you know? The friends of mine that have worked with drugs in a way which opens the consciousness more directly into the wisdom of the nature beings, always come into areas which have got extraordinary designs and patterns that today we call them fractals, but we also call them the way in which very small pieces can be put together to create great and enormous pictures, even in our assembly of information, of a photograph, into pure information and back into a form through how many pixels? This is the dissolving of information, the reforming of it, in a way that when you go into actually the source of wisdom in nature, we find the same information, we find the same designs. Who are the beings who manage electricity, who work with the management of the wind and the weather? And when we link with them, do they look like us, or do they speak English, or do they speak in a language which can be downloaded and then translated and then awakened? And what do we see when it is helpful to us? We say that belief through the orange center brings us into this kind of contact, and we can well understand, in one way, all the systems of discipline that have awakened to train the body, to discipline the emotions, to focus the mind, to make receptive the consciousness, by whatever means, by what any means. For our chakra system, the colors have never been fully opened yet. None of them are fully opened except occasionally in a very enlightened being. To open one center is often to create a disturbance which is almost unmanageable by the rest of our nature. And in the way that we work from our own background with color and sound and light, it is always to bring all aspects forward together, lest one should become greater and the others in their turn create a fallibility. For strength is nothing if it is not a part of a united system of growth. For as strong as it can be on one day, as weak as it can be on so many other days. So, when we come into the yellow center, we find that we have all the teachings, all the commentaries upon the commentaries. We find that we have a way of looking for the inner meaning of life that at a certain point lets go faith and belief in these invisible areas that we cannot measure, but puts enormous faith and belief into everything that we can measure. Science is the expression of a form of observation that looks into the invisible and seeks to discover and measure. It enters into the same ritual as any religious system in order to achieve a certain end, to prove a certain formula or principle. You must follow certain rules. You cannot follow whatever you like. In order to awaken within the, we could say, the seeking the gifts of the gods, there is a certain ritual that must be followed. When we pray often in repetitional ways. This is the basis of science, to look in repetitional ways. And science would seek, in its own way, to criticize everything that does not follow its own procedure, while itself follows the procedure of all the systems of belief, but not in quite the same focus as they feel. Yet both come to the same point. Yet to faith add knowledge. That's the key. That's the Gnostic key. And this means that there is no system of belief that can, in its own sense, be sufficient purely by following the rules, regulations, and rituals that have been laid down. We cannot have a master or a teacher and we give over all our power to them and they decide what is right or wrong for us. We can, but only for so long. And then what happens? Many of us are thrown out into the world from these ashrams, from these systems of obedience. We are into the world, into the yellow principle, we could say, where we have to learn to think for ourselves, question everything, doubt everything, deny almost everything, become the devil's advocate. Not an advocate for the devil, only the one who would seek to find the areas that cannot stand the test. The test of what? As if somehow we need to break down slowly all the areas of rigidity that are formed through red and orange, as beautiful as they are. And for yellow casts light on everything. You cannot enter into the impulse of belief through the yellow center without actually beginning to see more and more clearly the inequality that this brings. Some have power and some have none. How many people stand between us and the divine and claim authority that we cannot pass except through their agreement? And if we have their denial, where shall we be sent by their word? So, sooner or later, everything becomes more and more transparent. All these great owners of property, all the systems of belief own more property in any country than any other business. They've been there for centuries. And they have a great vested power. Now, all of that is fine, but as our intentions come into the yellow center, we begin really to see the inequalities, and then the level of compassion, the level of love begins to work on us beyond the outward forms and structures and further and deeper than our instinctive and collective mind. We cannot follow anybody except voluntarily and consciously, and each day we make the choice again to be with them or to follow them or to appreciate them. But we never take 2 days, one after the other, without questioning it again. There is no form to sign to say, this will fix me for life. For as much as today there can be such encouragement, tomorrow there can be such doubt. And each of us has that point within our life where life will test us and we will be found wanting. Well, we will all be found wanting somewhere perhaps, but the philosophy upon which we base our beliefs will be found wanting. At that moment, it will not comfort us at all, even as we try to comfort others at a certain moment with the best we know, and it doesn't seem to reach them. And that's the moment of change, or that's the moment, we could say, not always of awakening, but of releasing or dissolving. So we come into the green center, and we look for belief through the green center. And what is this? It's a spirit of renewal. Spirit of renewal. And what does that mean? Because it means that every system of belief must go through its seasons again and again and again. If rebirth is anything, you can't be reborn only once and think that's it forever. Life itself rebirths itself every year. And maybe much quicker than that also. The body itself regenerates itself over how many years? I've always thought of over 7 years, but perhaps it can happen much more quickly. Perhaps over 7 years we have been renewed almost many times and then not quite made it. So that when the 7 years multiply, we are renewed a little bit less and a little bit less. Nevertheless, the principle of renewal is the renewal of belief itself. And the principle of renewal is also the dissolving and reforming of all outer structures. Can we create a Chartres cathedral and say we should dissolve it? I don't think that is necessary. Certain aspects of life, like great mountains, like great deserts perhaps, one day they will be blooming, but great oceans, they are there. And they need to be there. We create their equivalent in our expressions, in our structures. But they are not relics. They don't talk about some Gothic time that we do not really understand, and a state of faith where people could believe, but we don't believe quite as much anymore. If we could appreciate through our green center these great structures, these temples and these cathedrals, these places of worship, in all over the world, even hidden in the jungles and lost, they are all points of light that link to space, that link timelessly to the streams of light that unite the mountain ranges, that unite the actual surface of the earth, and through which there is continuous and instant communication. Nothing is out of touch. Nothing is ever out of touch. As we say, every pine tree is in touch with every other pine tree along the throughout the earth every moment. There is no separation by the need for a telephone. There is a state of presentness. And through the green center we come into the sense of living within the presence. And the presence can be called by any name. Call it whichever name. Call them all the names. Call them no name. But it is within the presence that gives life to life and gives the sense of renewal to everything. Life on the earth is renewed each season, but life within the continuity of its own process has many cycles. But all these cycles, sometimes for a few years, sometimes for a few millennia, sometimes much longer than that, they all go through their process of birth, which is renewal, and then of ascension, and then of fulfillment, and then of release. Now, when we appreciate this through the green center, we begin to give meaning to all that has ever gone before. And we are not so bound into the limitation of belief through the centers, the base, the second chakra, and the solar plexus. All of these three centers together begin to free the crystallization into the pathways of the brain. You come into the green center, and we begin to change countries, change nations, change what we believe in, change the work that we do, change the way we look at life and the cycles within a life. And then we enter into, in a way, the family of man. And the family of man through all the different perspectives and points of view. And so when we come into the blue center, where will this take us? The blue really is space. How should we define space? I mean, blue, if we look up in the sky at the daytime, the space is blue. If we look at the sky at night, it's what color? Is it more an indigo color? On a good moonlit night, it's more an indigo, but with sparkles. Endless, countless sparkles. And so, when we come into the blue center, we come into, if you like, the way in which truth is a perspective, until truth is the union of many perspectives, until truth is a state of being able to see and hear through the eyes and ears of one another. You know, what is truth? That it should limit some as liars, accuse others as being ignorant, demand of others that they should go and look again, and place others as the ones who know what the others don't. So, what is truth? That it should bring us into a state of relationship, not to the belief itself, but to the source of the belief. Truth brings us into touch with the Christ within, with the Buddha within, with the Muhammad within, with Moses within, with Krishna within. It brings us into touch with the impulses that have given expression throughout a form that have been embodied through cosmic beings. But we link to the cosmic being or the cosmic source or the cosmic origin. What are these? These are points of light that go beyond the visible spectrum, but through the aspect of blue, so we begin to feel the cosmic source or the reality of what? Of angels, archangels, dominions, powers, thrones, seraphims, cherubims. How should we talk about these great hierarchies of beings that go beyond what we can measure, but not beyond what we can experience to the imaginative mind? For all these things have been defined just enough so that we cannot hold them back, and they work upon us ceaselessly. And so we enter in through the blue aspect of belief into the ceaseless way in which the cosmic forces work upon us, until our own state of consciousness is no longer limited to race, creed, color, country, fashion, state of something that can be defined by somebody somewhere and then limited in fact, in consequence. And so we find through the blue impulse there is something that works like the sun and the rain upon the just and the unjust, constantly, continuously, and without limitation. And this takes the timeless aspect of belief into what we then can call the emergence of the reality of the purpose of life. Nothing hold back. Nothing can hold back the purpose of the reality of the inner impulse that gives life to life. And that we are joined to this. Out of the blue aspect of religion comes the reality of each life having a purpose, not just a sort of a good idea and something to do, but a purpose that is essential to the whole of creation, even as we look around the universe and realize how insignificant we are. The purpose to which we are joined gives significance to everything in our life. But this comes really only to life through the blue aspect of belief. And then when we come to the indigo, there we begin to take responsibility both individually and collectively for the state of knowledge that awakens within us, for the awakening of gifts and powers and abilities that we could never awaken on our own, that can only be really awakened collectively, and that, in fact, as we enter into them, ask of us to then have faith, to believe, without asking too many questions, without having to know in advance too many answers. But this only makes sense when we come into the indigo level of belief, when we feel the vibration of the very molecular structure of our body, when we feel this molecular structure resonating. Now, in a strange way, the color indigo links through the skeletal structure. It links through the most inanimate part of our body in one way, and yet the life within our skeletal structure is like a great solid-state instrument. It is resonant, living, crystalline information systems of collection, of magnification, of transformation, of exchange, but of contact. And so through indigo we are in contact with a partnership to the earth and nature, literally through our body, but through the consciousness of the cosmos as it is mirrored in the structure of our brain. The brain is directly an expression of the stars in the heavens to which we are born. As we form and as we take our first breath, we are directly connected in the design of our brain into the designs in heaven. These stars have a direct influence. We respond to the light of their impulses. We must take responsibility through our own character, our own nature, through our own choices. But the capacity to think, feel, and to sense and to know is related directly to cosmic anchor points, which themselves are, we could say, the living expression of states of being, of divine beings in this state of expression. And so we find, as we come into then the violet level of belief, where do we find ourselves? Because we could say that violet is a royal color. It's the color that gives command, authority. And in its highest sense, the color of command and authority in being in command of all is in truth only in command through its ability to be in service to all. There is no power for its own sake. There is no individual given power in order to make them greater than anybody. Nobody is greater than anybody. But the quality of command, the realization of a state of power, is literally the state of surrender to the will of the Creator that unifies all the colors, and through the pure, clear, transparent white light, as we say, holds that bridge between life in this world and life within its cosmic connections and dimensions. The color violet works actually through the endocrine systems of the body, works through the way in which chemistry can be adjusted in a moment. It responds, our nervous system through the yellow center, our glandular system through the violet center, respond intimately and infinitely in its detail to every thought, every feeling, every emotion, every sense. Our bloodstream changes, even as we change moment by moment. What we feel and what we think, and our motivation and what we sense and what we feel from our environment and our way of sharing with others, unconsciously or consciously, is instantly and minutely expressed through the blood. And the blood is an expression of the higher sense of our identity and the purpose of our coming. The name of our spiritual name of our identity is the name of the job we have come to do. It's a job description. And the work that we've come to do is in the name of the Creator that has named us and given us this job to do. It's fun to think of it that way. It's not limited to a boilermaker where we join the union, or just an accountant where we have to calculate, or a taxi driver. Probably we're closer to a taxi driver to travel between one place and another and never know where the next customer will ask to go. But as we bring these impulses together, so we must give voice to it all, somehow, some way. Everyone works through the pathways of belief, whether they know it, like it, accept it, deny it, makes no difference. Everyone works through the pathways of belief. We believe in something, even if it's only money or the lack of money. We believe in science, Even if we believe that science, even in all its limitations, is the arbitrator until it can tell us more, there is nothing more to tell that we should believe. All of us then work with belief in one form or another, and to give form to it, so we create our homes, our families, and we live in our communities, and we have our rules and regulations. And then we have all the rules and regulations that help us to obey the rules and regulations. As we find, singularly, humanity is not very good at obeying consistently the rules and regulations that it is also singularly very good at creating. Always one group suffers as another group seems to do better, and always there are those who have to struggle to get the value out of the rules while others seem to be able to bend them, and so on and so on. But nevertheless, to give form, we must give sound, and to give sound, we then go to school, you know. And to go to school means we discuss everything in one form or another. We have to make sense of something in enough for the day, and we need to then enter into we could say, the choices that we make in what to do about it all. I'm always interested in the motivation that brings us here in the evening, you know. For me personally, it's a longing to talk about it all. I can talk to the parrot, you know, but it will probably tell me what I just told it. That's worrying. I can talk to the dog and the cat, and they'll just be pleased to be in my company. And that's good enough on some days, but not every day. Sometimes it's good to share ideas, even if everybody goes to sleep. At least they're there physically, you know. But when we come together in an evening like this evening, the motivation is really to enter into a kind of a debate, to enter into a way in which the ideas can be challenging. I personally draw the ideas out of the atmosphere of everybody, and everybody together as a state of attraction, hopefully to a reasonable state of information. But we are here to challenge each other and to challenge ourselves, to think for ourselves, to pick the fruit that is ripe wherever we find it, and to take the ideas that are not yet ripe and leave them for a while, and to take other ideas which look very good but are unpalatable and cook them and see what flavors we can add to them. But not to get stuck with old food that is rehashed, or convenience food that is just warmed by some molecule vibration. But to actually find fresh food, fresh ideas, fresh thoughts, and fresh impulses. Now, these impulses don't have to last forever. We're here to stimulate and challenge one another. I'm here to make a monodialogue of it all, and at the same time to realize that just a wavelength away there is this exchange that is unceasing. And to encourage, hopefully, a little bit, that everyone will go away and believe a little bit more in whatever it is you believe in, and question a little bit more of whatever it is within your life that needs questioning, and not to be afraid to do it, or to be afraid together to do it and see what happens, but we're all here together. We say that the Lord makes much better use of a good sinner, a happy sinner in a way, which in a certain sense means that those who question the Creator and the formal expression of its existence are much more interesting to the forces of creation than those who follow and repeat and do not choose, for whatever reason, to go a little bit further in their own right. How shall we judge our lives when we have gone? By their color and their sound, of course. By the way in which it weaves and interweaves within our auric patterns and radiations, where everything is recorded in this cosmic digital information system. You know, we are told that everything is registered, nothing is forgotten. It's not very difficult. If they can check up every single mobile phone conversation and know exactly who called and who received it, and they can do that easily right now, and we are still so primitive. We are worrying about renewing Trident missiles. to blow up the world. So we can imagine that the Creator is able to register everything effortlessly. Nothing is lost. Perhaps a few shopping lists, maybe there are things that do not make an imprint. But anything that resonates into the creative purpose of the individual resonates. And that resonance is never lost. And the relationship between one individual and another within this resonance is never lost. For any tune or any symphony, those instruments that belong and those artists that play those instruments can never ever be lost. That's karma. Everyone who belongs together in whatever form they come, in one way or another. They come to play the tune that is unfinished, the symphony that is not completely composed. If we could see it, and when we see it in this way, then we no longer get identified into personal deniability or liability. We get directly and deeply concerned with the values of life and with the choices that bring us into cosmic relationships through human expression within the qualities that we could say come through the colors and sounds of courage and generosity and the sharing of ideas, the renewal of faith, the freeing of truth into an embrace and never a judgment. And yet judgment itself as a way of belonging, not as a way of denying or imprisoning, a way of belonging which is the way to freedom. And in all of this, there is a touch of surrender and service. So each color serves all the others every time and constantly. Each level of belief serves all the other levels of belief, even while one is a little bit dominant in its own time and in its own cycle. We each see the world through the eyes that we have come to share. And yet the eyes of the world see us. And in that sharing, we awaken and our vision enlarges. We do change. We do grow. Nothing is ever wasted. The fulfillment of life is within the value of its imperfection, not in the completion of anything. The freedom of life is that it renews itself again and again. And the outer forms are no imprisonment, and there is no judgment that creates imprisonment. For every color flows, flows, flows. It is, light is a flow, and it is an impulse. Sound is a form, and it is a frequency. As the two come together, life holds its purpose through the design of a creator that works moment by moment and joins us to the very purpose of our being. Within us all, as one of us unites in one way, it brings that sense of union more than ever now to everyone. And in a moment, it could be that we find the whole of the world shifts to a different perspective. And what was a trident missile of defense becomes a celebration of a level of awareness where there is no death, we know it. And therefore there is no purpose in taking life, and we know that. So these are some thoughts that we could share just about our light and color and sound into our systems of belief. They really are there, as we say, just to stimulate your own ideas and also to allow the differences, the space that sometimes they demand and insist. Also to appreciate that we are not here to confront or change the systems or beliefs of anyone else. But that which belongs will unite, and that which is not ready to change will change. But we can go our own way. There is another way that will go. We'll all meet at a certain point. But there is a navigation in this. It does bring us into the way that Suffering changes the nature of its experience. Work changes the level of its reward and its fulfillment. Relationships become an area of a far more interesting appreciation of the individual understanding the collective, or nobody sharing with another that they do not also sense and feel how it is to be seen ourselves. So we just have a meditation to bring it together. It is good to follow a teaching and to be guided by a teacher, to enter into the discipline that would unite us within a common theme. For this itself is a state of growth, and the education of it frees us into a view of life which allows us to live life through this view with meaning and purpose. This itself leads us into the recycling of it all. For are we not born again and again, through each breath, each heartbeat, each day, each year, and each life also? Shall we limit it, as if we could only measure life in time, but we could measure time in life, as if it is a useful element in its expression? And as we are entering into the recycling of it all, perhaps we enter into another octave of the very processes that we have been so obedient, to which we have been so devoted and dedicated. How will they be at another octave? And here we find what separated us at one level unites us at another. What gave us a limited sense of focus and intention, and even measured the quality of reward we might achieve, at another level puts tools in our hand and gives us work to do, and opens the pathway of service that asks no reward for itself. And what when we go up an octave again in these beliefs? Where do we find ourselves? But within a state of understanding that allows us from this level to enter in to the levels of forgetfulness, but no longer to forget, into the levels of service, and yet to know of our cosmic origins, into the levels of cosmic belonging, and to know the value and importance of making it on earth as it is in heaven. Perhaps we are now just at the beginning of this, upon the threshold of this, within a new awareness of all that it means. Without each other we cannot achieve this. How far will we get with each other? There is no measurement. For time seeks to be the reference to this, and it is not. And our understanding of life seems to be the limit of this reference, and it should not be. So we enter in now, upon this threshold, into the limitlessness of our own awakening, individually because of our collective belonging, independently because of the contribution of all others, in concern for one another, and yet freeing each other to go and flow and learn and grow according to our own original choices. These are the rules and regulations as they become more conscious. For to live at this level, we are within the natural obedience to the very laws that are the fabric and framework of the system of light upon which our lives are woven and rewoven again and again. So we hold these thoughts just a moment as we anchor the evening. Okay.